Hello friends and welcome back. Today I have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I have a viewer question of the video we're going to chat about just briefly. I have the $5 pattern for the month of July. Can you believe we are already talking about pattern of the month for July? What? This summer is zipping right along. And then I have just a couple bundles that I want to show you. For those of you that watched the plaid sheep video, I mentioned a couple bundles, and then I had thought I could come back and show them to you at the end of that video, but then I wrapped that quilty field trip episode right up and never showed you the bundles, so I thought I could show you those in a little bit better detail. So it's a fun one planned for today. Stick around. Let's start with that viewer question of the day. This question comes to us from Angela, and she asked, when making a scrappy binding, what is the best length for strips, and would you sew the strips together end to end or on the diagonal? I gave this one a little bit of thought. I really like doing a scrappy binding, and I've never really considered what might be the best length for those binding strips, and I'm not sure if there is a best length. I probably wouldn't go super small because you end up with a lot of seams, and when you have a lot of seams in scrappy binding, you lose a fair amount of fabric. Now, if you have a whole bunch of little pieces of binding strips that you want to sew together to make super scrappy binding, and you don't mind having a lot of seams, you don't mind fussing around your corners a little bit so seams don't hit, or if they do hit in your corners, you're not bothered by that, you could certainly use smaller strips of binding for scrappy binding. I probably wouldn't go much below 6 inches. I think 12 inches works really nice, but you know, if you wanted to tuck some smaller pieces in there, you certainly could. And I do like them. I'm trying to think about the longest I would go, and I don't know, for scrappy binding, I probably wouldn't want to go longer than I'm going to say 18 inches. That's just off the top of my head, just because you want to see a lot of those colorful bits of scraps all around the perimeter of your quilt. And if you have some of those longer pieces, you don't notice the scrappiness as quickly. So that's just my personal preference. That, you know, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get different answers for that, but that's probably where I would land. I'd be real happy in about like a 6-inch to a 15-inch or so chunk for a scrappy binding. That would make me pretty happy, but that's not to say that I wouldn't go longer or shorter depending on the fabric scraps that I was working with. In reference to the second part of that question about whether I'd be joining on the diagonal or a straight seam for that binding, I much prefer a diagonal join rather than a straight join. And that is mostly because I don't like the bulk that you get right in that seam on your binding when you do just a straight join. I'll do it for a stripe binding. You know I love my striped bindings. I will sometimes do it for a striped binding, but even with a stripe, I tend to do a diagonal join just because it lays so nicely as opposed to when you do a straight join. So that's my answer for that. And as I said, different quilters are going to have different answers, but I think it's always nice to hear how different quilters approach different problems. So let's move right on into our $5 pattern of the month. You guys love when we do the Barn Star patterns for the $5 patterns. So we are doing Barn Star 3 for our $5 July pattern of the month. This quilt was originally made in strawberry jam fabric. The pattern cover, if you look at it, features beautiful day fabric. And if you go over to my blog, I'm going to mock up this quilt in some fresh and fun collections so that you can see what it looks like in fabric lines that are currently in quilt shops. I think this would be beautiful in Starberry, so I'm going to have to make sure and do it in Starberry, but I'll come up with some other good ones for you guys to take a peek at as well. So I've got that blog post linked in the description box. Now, in regard to piecing level quilting skills that you might need to make this quilt, you are going to need to know how to do flying geese. We make flying geese in this quilt pattern. We also make half square triangles in this quilt pattern. So those are some quilting skills that you would be utilizing in making this pattern. The other skill is accurate cutting, because this pattern includes some 3/8 cutting measurements, which can be a little bit trickier than cutting maybe a 1/2 inch measurement or a 1/4 inch measurement. So just tuck that information in the back of your head. So some accurate cutting on interesting measurements, flying geese, and half square triangles are going to be some of the main quilting skills you are going to need to piece this pattern. This quilt finishes at 40 inches square with that border all around the perimeter, the same size as all of the other Barn Star patterns that I've released. We are up to 8 individual Barn Star patterns now, and the 9th is designed, written, and you will be seeing that before too long. You guys love the Barn Stars. I love the Barn Stars too. There is just nothing more satisfying than a quick 1-block quilt, which you can use for a table topper, a wall hanging. They make beautiful baby quilts as well. The pattern is $5 over in my Etsy shop for this month, the month of July, and you will find it in paper versions as well as PDF versions, both options for whichever works best for you. It's a yardage based quilt. I'll tack this little yardage information here, but really the nicest way to see the yardage is to go over to the Etsy listing, and I always have that information listed with each pattern in my Etsy shop, so you can easily see what fabrics you need before you purchase the pattern. So that is a quick share of Barn Star 8. There's the backing fabric. Again, this was strawberry jam fabrics that I used for my original Barn Star 3 pattern. That sums up Barn Star 3. If you have any questions about this Barn Star, be sure to let me know. Also, if you have any questions that you would want featured in an upcoming video, about anything quilting related, you can leave those questions in the comments. Just write question in all caps before leaving your question in the comments so that I know that it's one you'd like answered in a future video rather than a question that you might like answered right away. Okay, let's move on to those bundles. I've got them tucked back here. 2 different bundles I talked about in that plaid sheep field trip video I shared a couple weeks ago. Let's start with the wools. I mentioned that I bought wools, I like wools, and I've never done anything with them. And I thought you might like to see my little bundle of wools, because if that doesn't look like a Coriander Quilts palette, I don't know what is. It's all of my rainbow of warm sherbety colors. It's got the dark gray in there, and I thought we could just open this up and look at these. I have seen Lisa Bonjean as well as Joanna Figueroa, both Moda Fabrics designers, make beautiful wool quilts, and I just never have, but every time I see them I think, oh, those are so pretty. So I have some wools with not a plan in mind. Look at that. Can you see the variation in this one? Isn't that pretty? They are hand-dyed wools and just so pretty. I don't know, the variation that you get on these is so fun. Even like, look at that little green spot there on that aqua. So this is what we're looking at. I even got this little bit because I thought these were so pretty. I don't know what you would use them for. Well, you can use them for a lot of different projects. I know what I can use them for. I just don't know what I am going to use them for. But I love these fun little prints. This is I don't know how well the texture of this one shows up on camera, but it's a really pretty one too. So those are the wools that I was talking about in the video that I had purchased. And now there they sit on my shelf just waiting for a fun project. I know I've shared previously that I think it's a lot of fun to have little bits of fabric kind of tucked away that you really enjoy, that you had fun purchasing, that you can dive into when inspiration strikes. I like having just a few like that, not an overwhelming amount of things like that, but a few here and there is kind of fun to have. So those are my little wool stack. Just waiting. And then the other thing I wanted to show you was this little bundle of fabrics that I came home with after my plaid sheep visit. I shared photos of these over on my blog, but I had wanted to show them to you in a video also because they're fun. It's fun to see fabric. So these are these prints here. All the fun little woven fabrics with a lot of texture. And I think they're so pretty. Again, fabrics I don't have a pattern in mind or a project in mind, but fun to think and dream. Now this one is a heavier weight fabric, but I really liked it in there, and I wouldn't have any problem mixing all of these together, even though this one is heavier. I don't even know how to describe that. Probably one of you has a great way to describe what this fabric is. It doesn't feel like a linen to me. It's not as heavy as a canvas, but it's definitely heavier than these other fabrics here. But it had those stitchy pieces that I liked so much, and I really did like the way it mixed in with everything else. So that's the little plaid sheep bundle. I don't know what stock they have of these bundles. I know that they had sold out of them, but I know that you also were able to be notified of when more of these were back in stock. So I will see if I can find any information to include in the description box about this little bundle. The wools that they carry will vary from time to time. There's always something different in the shop when I go in. They don't always have the same colors. It's just fun going in there and seeing what they do have. So I probably won't be able to give you too much information about the wools. Just know that they have a great selection of wools. This one, I might be able to be a little bit more helpful. So if you're interested in more info about this, be sure to look in the description box below the video. Do you guys have any fun little bits and pieces of fabric maybe tucked away? Maybe it is a favorite Fed 8th bundle, layer cake, charm pack that you have just thrown in your stash somewhere that you're just waiting, excited to have, but no plans in mind for it. Let us know what you've got tucked in your stash. Maybe I run into you guys, maybe you are one of those quilters that only buys for the project they are making. I remember telling my mom when I very first started making quilts that that was the kind of quilter I was going to be. Because she was not. And I thought, my goodness, why are we always buying all of this fabric? And then there it sits and you're not using it. And I thought, if I'm going to be a quilter, I am going to only buy for the project that I am making. And well, that didn't last, but I admire those of you that are able to do that, that just buy for the project that you're making. And then when you're ready for a new project, you buy the new fabrics for the new project. I think that's wonderful. But if you are not, if you do have some little things tucked around here and there, I would love to hear about it. And I think we all enjoy reading down through those comments and seeing what other quilters are up to. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.